When I walked into that fire hall in my dress blues, 40 firefighters rose out of their folding chairs so fast, the legs screeched against the linoleum like a chord nobody meant to play. The DJ killed the music mid-song. My future brother-in-law's hand froze on his beer glass. And my stepfather, the man who had called me 40 minutes earlier to say he hoped I'd have the decency to leave my uniform in the car, looked at me like he was trying to place a stranger who happened to know everyone in the room. I'd pictured a moment like this for almost a decade. I never once pictured feeling this tired in the middle of it. My name is Captain Mirelle Donahue. I'm 31 years old and, before that night, I would have told you the worst thing that ever happened to me was a building collapse in 2021 that put 3 of my crew in the hospital. I would have been wrong. The worst thing was a kitchen table in Erie, Pennsylvania, when I was 16, and a man telling me that girls who wanted to play firefighter usually ended up disappointing everyone who loved them. That man's name was Russell Pruitt. He married my mother when I was 9, after my own father drank himself out of our lives, somewhere around my 7th birthday. Russell wasn't cruel in the dramatic way you see in movies. He never raised his voice, never raised a hand. He had a quieter weapon. He decided very early exactly who I was allowed to be, and he never updated the file. My younger half-sister Delphine was who he understood. She was soft-spoken and easy, good at dance recitals and thank-you notes. The kind of girl who made adults relax in her presence. I was the kid who took apart the garbage disposal to see how it worked and put it back together wrong twice before getting it right. Russell used to say, not unkindly, that I had a boy's mind in a girl's body, like it was a diagnosis he was being patient about. When I told them at 16 that I wanted to be a firefighter, my mother laughed before she could stop herself. Russell folded the newspaper the way he always did before delivering a verdict, set it down flat on the table, and told me I'd grow out of it, the same way I'd apparently grown out of wanting to be an astronaut and a marine biologist. Except I didn't grow out of this one. I volunteered at 17, dragging hose at training drills while boys twice my size watched to see if I'd quit. I didn't quit. At 19 I tested for the academy in Pittsburgh and scored 2nd in my class. Russell came to exactly 0 of my graduations. Not high school, not the academy, not the associate's degree I finished at night for 10 years straight while working full shifts. The academy was the first place nobody asked me to be smaller. Nobody cared if I'd brought a covered dish to a church potluck, or if my nails were done. They cared if I could carry 180 pounds of unconscious man down 4 flights of stairs in 0 visibility, and it turned out I could. It turned out I could do a great many things nobody at that kitchen table thought I had in me. But my family never quite let go of the story they'd already written about who I was supposed to become. Phone calls thinned out over the years the way they do. I missed Thanksgivings because I was working a 48-hour shift in a city 90 minutes away. Russell, introducing me to a neighbor once when I was home on a rare 3 days off, said, "This is Mirelle. She's in, emergency services," the same tone he might have used for someone who restocked vending machines. By then I had 22 people under my command on any given shift, and had been first on scene at a 4-alarm warehouse fire that made the regional news. He knew that. He said emergency services anyway. I told myself it stopped mattering. That's a lie people tell themselves so they can keep showing up to dinner. 3 days before Delphine's wedding, I was sitting in my office at Station 14 finishing incident reports when my phone buzzed on the desk. The text was from Russell. "Mirelle, for Delphine's sake, please leave the uniform at home tomorrow. This is her day, not a chance to make a statement. I hope you understand." I read it twice. Outside my window, a cold rain was coming sideways off Lake Erie, the kind that makes the rookies complain about their boots. I didn't feel angry, which surprised me. I felt strangely hollow, like someone had reached into my chest and quietly removed something I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten its weight. 14 years of service, 3 commendations, a building I'd walked into that other people walked out of because of decisions I made in under a minute. And he still thought my work was something to apologize for at a wedding. That night I almost didn't go. I sat alone in my apartment in Erie with a glass of whiskey I didn't really want, scrolling through nothing on my phone. No husband, no kids waiting up. My ex-fiancé, a paramedic named Connor, used to say the department would always be my first marriage, and I used to argue with him about it. Sitting there that night, I didn't have much of an argument left. Around 9:30, my phone rang. It was Battalion Chief Odalise Reyes. Chief Reyes to everyone but me, since the night a beam came down 8 feet from both of us, and we decided afterward that surviving something like that earns you a first name. "Tell me you're still going tomorrow," she said. "No hello." Thinking about sitting this one out. A pause on her end long enough that I could hear the TV behind her go quiet. "Mirelle, you've spent 14 years running into buildings other people are running out of. Don't start hiding from your own family now. You think it actually matters? Whether I show up in the uniform or not?" "No," she said. "I think you matter. The uniform's just the part they're scared of." That landed somewhere I wasn't prepared for. I pulled my dress blues out of the back of my closet the next morning. The ones I wore exactly twice a year. For funerals and graduations. Brass buttons gone a little dull, the captain's bars catching the bathroom light. People think a uniform makes you feel powerful. Mostly, it just reminds you what it costs to earn it. The drive down to the venue took just under 2 hours. Gray Pennsylvania farmland sliding by, silos and church steeples and feed stores with flags out front. The kind of small towns where everybody still says sir and ma'am without thinking about it. The wedding was at a renovated barn outside a little town called Conneaut Lake. String lights threaded through the rafters, mason jars on every table, the whole rustic chic thing. Delphine had been pinning on a board for 2 years. By the time I parked, the late afternoon sun was doing that gold thing it does in early June, and I sat in my car for a solid 4 minutes before I made myself get out. 31 years old, captain's bars on my shoulders. Feeling exactly like the 16-year-old who got laughed at over shrimp scampi. My mother found me first, in the gravel lot, smoothing down a dress she'd clearly bought new for the occasion. Oh, Mireille. Her eyes went straight to the uniform like it had personally wronged her. You actually wore it? Yes, Mom, I did. She lowered her voice the way she always did when she was about to say something she'd rehearsed. Today is supposed to be about your sister. Same script, different decade. Russell came around the side of the barn a minute later, and even at 63, he still carried himself the way he had. When he ran the hardware store for 30 years, a man used to being the final word in a room. His jaw set the second he saw the uniform. You couldn't give your sister one day, Mireille. I'm standing here quietly, Russell. You know exactly what you're doing. That one landed harder than it should have. Because the truth was, I'd spent my entire adult life trying not to make this family uncomfortable with what I'd built. Changing the subject at Christmas. Letting Russell call it emergency services. Never once correcting anyone who asked if I was still doing the firefighter thing. Like it was a phase with an expiration date instead of 14 years and counting. Delphine found me near the barn doors a few minutes later, gorgeous in a way that made my chest ache a little. The same kid who used to beg me to push her on the porch swing until our arms hurt. She hugged me hard, and for a second it was just the two of us, the way it used to be before Russell's opinions got between everything. Then she pulled back, and the old discomfort crept into her face. Mireille. She laughed nervously at her own slip. Would you maybe think about taking off some of the pins during the reception? They kind of stand out. I looked at my little sister, beautiful and nervous, still somehow afraid of taking up space next to me after 25 years. And I didn't feel angry. I just felt sad in a tired, familiar way. I earned these, Delphine. I know. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. She wasn't. That was almost the worst part. But the message underneath was the one I'd been getting my whole life. Make yourself smaller. Make room. Disappear a little, so everyone else can be comfortable. I took a seat at a half-empty table near the back of the barn during the reception, away from the head table, away from most of the relatives who'd be counting my pins. Or so I thought. A young man in a Conneaut Lake Volunteer Fire Department polo approached the table about 40 minutes in. Nervous in the particular way young guys get around rank. He said his older brother had been a probie under my command, 2 summers back, during the warehouse fire. That I'd pulled him out of a stairwell that collapsed 90 seconds after we cleared it. My family talks about you at dinner, he said quietly. Every year on the anniversary. Before I could answer him properly, a man at the next table stood up. Then another. A retired battalion chief from 3 counties over, who I didn't even know was on the guest list, put his hand flat over his heart, and then it moved through the room like something catching fire in reverse. Table by table, chair legs scraping against the barn's old plank floor, until every firefighter and EMT and cop in that building was on their feet at once. 40, maybe 45 of them. The DJ's song died mid-chorus. Every civilian in the place went absolutely still, glasses half raised, not understanding yet what they were looking at. I sat frozen for half a second, genuinely stunned, before a man near the entrance. Assistant Chief Garen Whitlock, a man who'd run into more burning buildings than I could count and who I hadn't seen since a structure collapse 5 years back that put both of us in the hospital. Squared his shoulders and said it loud enough for the whole barn to hear. Captain on the floor. I rose slowly out of my chair. In the quiet that followed, I finally let myself look at my parents. My mother had her hand pressed over her mouth. Russell stood absolutely still beside her, his face pale under the string lights, looking at me like he genuinely could not reconcile the daughter he'd spent 25 years minimizing with whatever was happening in front of him. Garen crossed the room first. Permission to speak freely, Captain. You always did anyway. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the room, breaking some of the tension. What followed I still don't have great words for. Off-duty firefighters I'd trained crossed the barn to shake my hand. A young woman introduced herself as a probie, heading to the academy in the fall, practically vibrating with nerves. and asked if she could shake my hand too. A man with a noticeable limp, retired now, engineer Phil Castellano, told me I'd sat with his wife for 6 straight hours in a hospital waiting room the night his partner didn't make it out of a house fire on Route 6. Most captains send a card, he said. You stayed! That's the job, I told him. No, ma'am. His voice cracked a little. That's not the job. That's just who you are. I couldn't say anything for a second, standing there surrounded by all of that earned, unforced respect. The only thing I could think about was how badly I'd wanted even a sliver of it, from the one man, standing 30 feet away, with his hand on the back of a folding chair. Around 9, I slipped out toward the lake. The noise of the reception faded behind me as I walked down past the parking lot, to the little dock the venue had for photos. Connaught Lake stretched out dark and quiet under a half-moon, a few porch lights glowing on the far shore, crickets going in the tall grass. Chief Reyes found me out there a few minutes later, 2 plastic cups of bourbon in her hands. Traffic, she said, handing me one. That's your excuse for everything. We stood there a while without talking. Then she asked, quiet, you okay? That question nearly undid me more than the whole barn standing up had. I'm 31 years old, I admitted. And I still wanted that man to look proud of me tonight. That never fully goes away, she said. My father shook my hand once, the day I made lieutenant. I remember the date better than my own anniversary. I laughed, a little wet around the edges. Then footsteps on the dock behind us. And Reyes excused herself without being asked. It was Delphine, still in her gown, holding it up off the boards, wearing the careful expression people get when they're approaching something they're afraid might break. We stood at the end of the dock a while before she finally spoke. I owe you an apology. Asking you to take off the pins, that was wrong. And it wasn't really about the pins. I know, I said. She looked out over the water. You want to know something terrible? I spent most of my life thinking Mom and Russell loved me more because I was somehow easier than you. She shook her head slowly. But tonight I figured out the truth. They never understood you enough to actually appreciate you. That landed quiet and painful, the way true things usually do. You were always the brave one, she said. I should have said that 20 years ago instead of asking you to hide it. My mother came down to the dock a few minutes after that, mascara smudged, looking smaller than I'd ever noticed. She told me she'd kept every newspaper clipping about me. The academy graduation, the warehouse fire, my promotion to captain, folded inside a recipe box in the back of her pantry for 14 years. Russell never knew. Why hide it? I asked her. She looked down at her hands. Because I never figured out how to be proud of you, out loud without it looking like I was saying something about him. That one sentence explained 25 years better than anything else could have. Russell came last. He stood beside me at the railing a long time before he said anything, staring out at the dark water, like the answer was floating somewhere on it. Then he told me something he'd never told a living soul. He'd been supposed to enlist in 1972, right at the tail end, his number already pulled. His own father had made calls. A cousin on the draft board. Favors nobody talked about after. And kept him stateside while a friend of his named Desmond Ruiz, who he'd worked the same shift with at the steel plant since they were 18, shipped out instead. Desmond came home in a box 11 months later. I stood at his funeral, and everybody called him a hero, Russell said, voice low. And the only thing I could think the whole time was, that should have been me. 25 years of my childhood rearranged itself in about 4 seconds. The coldness, the dismissiveness, the need to keep shrinking what I'd become. None of it had ever really been about me. It was shame, 4 decades old, buried so deep, he'd half forgotten where he'd put it. When you walked into burning buildings, he said slowly. You were doing the thing I was too scared to do at your age, and I didn't know how to live next to that. I held onto the railing and just breathed for a second. You could have told me, Russell. Any of it. Anytime. He looked at me, really looked, in a way I genuinely could not remember him ever doing. Muriel. His voice cracked on my name like it cost him something to say it right. I never stopped being proud of you. Not once. Not for a single year. You had a hell of a way of showing it. He nodded, jaw working. I know. The next morning I was checking out of my motel before sunrise. Old shift work habit, when I came out to the parking lot and found Russell already there, leaning against his truck with a battered shoebox under one arm. Inside were letters. My letters, the ones I'd mailed home from the academy in Pittsburgh. Some of them folded and unfolded so many times the creases had gone soft as cloth. Your mother kept every one, he said. He pulled one out carefully, like it might tear in his hands. There's a line in this one I couldn't stop thinking about last night. He handed it to me. I recognized my own 19-year-old handwriting immediately, the loop still a little childish. He swallowed hard before he spoke. You wrote, I hope someday Russell will actually be proud of me. His eyes went wet. I was proud the whole time. I just never figured out how to say it where you could hear it. I looked at the old man standing in that gravel lot in the early light, and for the first time in 25 years, I let myself believe him. Delphine showed up a few minutes later with 2 coffees and a bag of gas station donuts, still half in her travel clothes from the night before. She hugged me hard and made me promise no more disappearing for 6 months at a stretch without a phone call. I'll try, I told her. And I meant it more than I expected to. Driving back north toward Erie, Conneaut Lake fading out of my rearview mirror, I turned something over in my head that I hadn't been able to put into words in 31 years of living. Making captain wasn't the proudest moment of my career. This was, not because anyone finally clapped for me, but because somewhere on that dock, I stopped needing them to. A few hours later, I stopped for gas near the station, still in my dress blues because I hadn't bothered to change. A teenage girl filling up the next pump over kept glancing at the uniform, then finally asked if I was really a firefighter. Eyes wide in that way kids' eyes get when they're deciding whether something they want is actually possible. I told her it was the best decision I ever made, even on the days it nearly broke me. She smiled like she was filing that away for later. I got back in my car, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, the road ahead felt lighter than the one behind me.